Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video we're going to be looking at some NBA players that for whatever reason seem to always play extremely well against a particular team. So what I did is I went on Twitter and I asked you guys for some suggestions for players like this that you feel like always play well against a certain team, whether it be your own or another one. And then I went on Basketball Reference and looked at the stats for that player's career compared to the stats against that particular team and looked into them in a couple of different ways. Before we get started though, a couple of notes really quickly. One, unless I mention otherwise, these are all regular season statistics and they're all accurate as of December 2nd, 2019, because that's when I did the research for this video. Also, I'm planning on doing this in the opposite direction, so like star players that for whatever reason don't play well at all against a particular team. So if you have suggestions for players like that you would like for me to look into, then be sure to leave those down in the comments section below. But with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. First up on the list is Devin Booker versus the Philadelphia 76ers. For his career against the entire league across 290 games, he averages about 21-4 with 44% shooting from the field and just under 36% from three-point range. However, in his 9 career games against the 76ers, those stats jump up a pretty good amount, most specifically points per game, as you can see over 28 points per game, right around the same assist averages, and the shooting percentages both from the field as well as from three are significantly higher. Not only that, but Booker has scored 30+ points 5 times against the Sixers and 40+ 2 different times, and all of those have come since just 2017. And since the start of the 2017-18 season, in the 5 games that Booker has played against the Sixers, he's averaged over 38 points per game. However, in those 5 games that I mentioned in which Booker scored a ton of points, his team is only 2-3, and lifetime he's only 3-6 against the Sixers in those 9 games that I talked about. And this isn't even the team that he has scored the most points per game against in his career. That's actually the Boston Celtics, with the 76ers coming in second. And even though this is really impressive, specifically how many more points per game Booker is averaging against the Sixers and against other teams, it's pretty easy to see why that's the case, at least compared to his career averages, because his career averages are one, a larger sample size. You can have a couple of huge games like he has against the Sixers, and your points per game can go up a lot over just a 9-game sample size. But the other part of this is that this factors in Booker's earlier career more in his career stats rather than in just those 9 games against the Sixers, and he's hitting a lot more threes. But even then, it's clear that especially recently over those last 5 games that Booker has played against the Sixers, he's playing extremely well against them, so this one ended up being true. Next up on the list now is Andrew Wiggins against the Oklahoma City Thunder. His career stats you can see on screen, just under 20 points per game, about 2 assists, and 44 and 33% shooting percentages, respectively. Against Oklahoma City, however, in 20 career games, he's averaging just under 22 points per game, just under 3 assists, and the shooting percentages are right around the same. Wiggins has scored 30+ points in those 20 games twice and 40+ once, both of which have been since 2018. And since the start of last season, Andrew Wiggins has averaged 28 points per game against the Thunder in 4 games, and the Wolves are 3-1 in those games. And again, you can kind of see what's happening here. With Andrew Wiggins, it's not that over all 20 games that he's played against the Thunder, he's played extremely well. It's more so recently. Those games that he's played against them since 2018, his points per game average is so much higher than it normally would be against most other teams, as well as for his career, whether against Oklahoma City or in general. So this is more of a recency bias that we're seeing here, where Thunder fans are saying, man, Andrew Wiggins always kills us, but it's more about the recent games than over his entire career. But it's still true that recently he's been really good against them. However, interestingly, the highest career points per game for Wiggins is actually against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Thunder actually 5th on that list, which of course is interesting because Wiggins was originally drafted by Cleveland and then traded away to Minnesota in the Kevin Love deal when LeBron James decided to come back to Cleveland. So for whatever reason, whenever he plays against Cleveland, he really steps up his game, and his points per game average is almost 26 a game, even though he's still really good against the Thunder's 5th best points per game average against any team across the entire league, not quite as good as his games against the Cavaliers. Next up now is actually the inspiration for this list, and that is Buddy Hield against the Boston Celtics, because I saw Funky tweet about how he always destroys the Celtics, and I thought, hey, maybe I should look into that. And this to me is by far the most interesting statistical comparison throughout this entire video. In his career versus the entire rest of the league in 262 games, across every single game that Buddy Hield has played to this point, his career averages are a little over 15 points per game, 2 assists, and 44 and 41% shooting percentages. However, in 8 games against the Celtics, Hield averages 23, almost 3 assists a game, over 50% from the field, and almost 52% from three-point range. Not only that, but he scored 30 plus 3 different times, 35 plus twice, and 40 plus once. All 3 were his most recent 3 games versus the Boston Celtics. And get this, because this is just absolutely absurd. Hield's averages in his last 3 games versus Boston are 36.6 points per game, 24 for 43 from 3, which is 55%, so an average of 8 made threes a game versus the Celtics in his last 3 games against them, 2 of which were on the road. And so it should come as no surprise that Buddy Hield's highest career points per game against a specific team is the Boston Celtics, and the next closest is almost 4 points per game less against the Miami Heat. And this one, I don't really have an explanation for, because if this was going back a little bit further when Isaiah Thomas was still there, maybe Hield was getting some favorable defensive matchups then, but the Celtics have been one of the better teams in the league over the last couple of seasons, but for whatever reason, Buddy Hield just absolutely destroys them. Now, earlier on in his career when he was with the Pelicans, he wasn't doing very much at all against Boston, so that tells you how much higher his points per game total against them is now, with the sample size being so small and him scoring in the single digits the first couple of times that he played Boston, and now over his last 3, he's almost 40 points per game, and the 3-point shooting percentages are just absolutely ridiculous. So I don't know if Buddy Hield is just really good in Boston and he needs to go play there, because like I said, 2 of those 3 games were on the road. I don't know what it was, but Buddy Hield, if you're looking for a daily fantasy basketball play, if Buddy Hield is playing the Celtics, put him in there no matter what the monetary amount is, because he's just absolutely nuts against them. Moving on now to number 4, and this is Julius Randle versus the Dallas Mavericks. For his career against the entire league in 331 games, he's about 15.5 points per game, almost 9 rebounds, almost 50% from the field, and less than 30% from three-point range. However, against the Mavericks in 17 games, he's at 19 and 10 with over 50% from the field and over 30% from three-point range. Not only that, but he has 2 triple-doubles, 10 double-doubles in just 17 games. He scored 25 plus 3 different times and 30 plus once. And in 4 games with the Pelicans versus the Mavs last season, he averaged over 25 and 10 against the Mavs. And this, to me, is probably the second most interesting one on this list behind the Hield selection that we just talked about, because it is actually really significant how much higher his averages are against Dallas, given that it's 17 games. It's not like this is 8 or 9 games. It's a relatively large sample size compared to what we've seen on the rest of this list, and specifically against a Mavs team that generally has been pretty good defensively. It's pretty surprising. Now, obviously, those averages are brought up significantly by how well he was playing with the Pelicans last year against the Mavs, but also, this isn't even the team that he's played best against, at least in terms of points per game. That's actually the Lakers, and it's by a pretty significant margin, albeit in much less games. But in his revenge games last year against the Lakers, Julius Randle was playing out of his mind, even though maybe you could make the case that in terms of an all-around game, he was playing better against the Mavericks, but they're actually second in terms of points per game compared to the Lakers. So this is another one that you guys sent me that absolutely was true. Second to last now is another one against the Celtics, and this is Khris Middleton. In his career against the entire league, in 468 games, he's at about 15.5 points per game, 3 assists, 45 and 38% for his shooting percentages. But in his career against Boston in 21 games, and for the first time on this list, this is actually less, at 14.5 points per game, about 3.5 assists, 45 and 37% from shooting percentages. He scored 20 plus 5 different times and 25 plus once, but that doesn't really tell the whole story here, because it did take a little bit of time for Khris Middleton's career to really take off, and he's only really hit his stride in his last couple of seasons with the Bucks, so we're going to narrow that down a little bit more. So in 8 games with the Bucks against the Celtics since the start of the 2017-18 season, he actually averages over 18 points per game, and over 19 points per game since the beginning of last season. Now, that's still not a huge jump in terms of points per game compared to his entire career, but I do think I can see a reason why Celtics fans feel like Khris Middleton always plays well against them. Because in last year's postseason, which again is not incorporated into these numbers, he had a 28 and a 20-point game in games 2 and 3 respectively, and he made 7 threes in that 28-point game. However, when you just look at it as a whole in terms of his points per game for his career against the Celtics compared to the entire league, they're actually way down there. He scores the 22nd most points per game against the Celtics in terms of all the teams across the league, and the team in first is actually Phoenix. And last up now is Damian Lillard against the LA Lakers. His career versus the entire league in 567 games is over 23.5 points per game, 6.5 assists, 43 and 36% for his shooting percentages. However, in his career against the Lakers in 24 games, he's at almost 27 points per game, almost 7 assists, and 45 and 38% for his percentages. He scored 30 plus in 10 of the 24 games and 35 plus 4 different times. However, interestingly, this is not a recency bias thing, because only 3 of those games in which he scored a ton of points have come since 2018. And in his 4 most recent games versus the Lakers since the start of last season, he's at a little bit over 27 points per game, which is a lot more than his career average against the entire league, but not necessarily out of the norm for what he's been most recently for the last couple of seasons. But really, it's not about the recent games against the Lakers, which again is interesting because I thought a lot of these suggestions would be because a team most recently got killed by a certain player, but it's more about when you look at from his rookie season through the 2017-18 season, he has games of 39, 38, 36, and then 34 twice. However, even with all of that stuff said, when you look at his entire career, the Lakers are actually second for Damian Lillard in terms of points per game, with first actually being the Golden State Warriors at over 27 points per game. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.